And Russia appears to be on the brink of invading Ukraine. As we mentioned, the Kremlin said today that Russian forces destroyed 2 Ukrainian armored vehicles and killed 5 Ukrainians caught entering Russia. It's a worrying announcement as President Putin holds a very public meeting with his national security advisors on whether to recognize separatists in Ukraine as an independent group. Meanwhile, President Biden has agreed to a potential summit with Vladimir Putin in the hopes of finding a diplomatic resolution, but the White House insists Russia is still preparing to invade. ABC News senior investigative reporter Aaron Katersky joins me from Ukraine, along with defense analyst Mick Mulroy. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Aaron, I want to start with you because one of our reporters who's there in the region called this meeting between Putin and his national security advisors, quote, utterly surreal. So what do you think it means for Putin to even propose recognizing these Russian-controlled separatist regions in Ukraine as independent?
It would certainly be an inflammatory step, Diane, because it would effectively end the efforts for diplomacy. And there really are 2 things happening simultaneously. On the one hand, you have the Russian foreign minister saying that President Putin would be willing to at least think about a summit with President Biden. That's contingent on there not being any kind of an invasion. On the other hand, you had this rather extraordinary meeting of Russia's National Security Council where President Putin went around the room and asked people for their opinion of whether Russia should recognize these breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine as independent. And if he does that, that would give him the pretext that he needs to then send military force in under the guise of protecting the Russian speakers in those regions.
Mick, what do you think Vladimir Putin's trying to do here?
So, Diane, I think this is part of the playbook. Essentially, this is just theater. They are intending to do this. They are intending to invade. We've seen the forces come out of the assembly areas and starting to get into attack position. We've seen the activities in what we would call phase 0 or preparation phase with cyber attacks and these really what I would call amateurish false flag operations and videos that have been deemed fraudulent almost immediately after disclosure. This just seems to be one more part of their plan to prepare and then eventually invade Ukraine.
And Aaron, Ukraine has denied those reports that 2 Ukrainian armored vehicles and that 5 Ukrainians entered Russia and were destroyed. We have seen, as Mick mentioned, a barrage of false reports, staged videos by Russia already. So how credible is this announcement by Russia at this point?
Well, you have to take it with a rather large grain of salt, I think, because the U.S. and its Western allies believe this is simply Russia raising the prospect of a Ukrainian invasion to give them an excuse, again, to send in their own military troops, which have been massed rather menacingly along Ukraine's borders. The Ukrainians have used a recent term of art, calling it fake news, that their own people are launching attacks into Russia-controlled areas or into Russian soil itself, despite these videos and the like, which have only been ramping up in recent days. And I think it's part of the reason why we've seen the U.S. call it out at every turn. Secretary of State Blinken anticipated just this: false flags followed by meetings of Russian officials to give kind of a rubber stamp to whatever Vladimir Putin ultimately decides.
And Aaron, a letter obtained by ABC News that was sent to the United Nations says the U.S. has, quote, credible information that indicates Russian forces are creating lists of identified Ukrainians to be killed or sent to camps following a military occupation. And that report includes journalists, anti-corruption activists, even minorities on a list of potential targets. So what do we know about that at this point?
Well, this letter to the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights suggests that Russia will not be content simply with sending some troops across and staying in eastern Ukraine, but rather, and the U.S. has talked about this, coming in to make regime change in Kyiv, in the capital. And that would include then this list that the U.S. believes Russia is drawing up of journalists, of dissidents, and others to really cleanse the capital, especially of people who might be anti-Russian or some kind of anti-Russian ideologues. And that would then allow them to decapitate the government, install perhaps a puppet government, the theory goes. We're a little ways off from this, but the U.S. believes that Russia really has some intent to cause significant human suffering if it moves forward with this invasion.
And Mick, what do these developments from just today alone do for both the chances of diplomatic efforts working, and how does it change a potential military response by the U.S.?
So first of all, I'd like to say that Aaron's exactly right. What the role that the Special Operations Forces will play in this conventional conflict will be just that. They will likely go after command and control leadership targets. They will then start a whole propaganda element, installing their own individuals. It's right out of what they call the Gerasimov doctrine, which is how Russia wages war. So I think that's entirely right. I think the Spetsnaz will probably be leading that effort. As far as diplomacy, I think, and I think Secretary Blinken has made it clear, we are absolutely willing to continue diplomacy. They will agree to meet this Thursday only if Russia doesn't invade. And it does appear that Russia may be using all of these diplomatic efforts as simply a ruse to prepare for this invasion. Only time will tell. I hope that's not the case, but that's what it's looking at like right now.
All right, Aaron and Mick, we appreciate the analysis from both of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.